morning, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us again this Sunday with the story behind the Psalm. Morning,
Yes.
John. How are
Good
you?
morning, Roger. I'm doing great.
Good.
Beautiful day.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. We're in our Advent season and gearing up for Christmas. Looking forward to it. So, did you have a good week?
Had a wonderful week. Everything's going well in my world. Yep.
Same here. Things are good. So
Yeah.
no complaints.
And no complaints.
All right. Well, this morning we are into Psalm 52. And so once again, we're going to do the story behind the Psalm, and then we're going to kind of break down the Psalm a little bit. It's a short one, only 9 verses. So anyway, the story behind, we have Psalm 52, and the header on it is for the director of music, a maskil of David, when Doeg the Edomite had gone to Saul and told him, David has gone to the house of Ahimelech. So in the header, we've got a couple of different things. One is a maskil, and a maskil is defined basically as a psalm that teaches you something. So this one's supposed to teach us something, so we're going to look for some lessons. And then we've got Doeg the Edomite. We're going to get into his story. And also something else that, depending upon what translation, when we get into the psalm and you read it, there's this word Selah that you'll see every once in a while, S-E-L-A-H. And it kind of breaks up the paragraphs. And we don't know what the definition of that one is. But it is kind of, it can mean a whole bunch of things. It could be a musical term like a rest or a pause. It's interesting though, the old Baptist preacher from the 1800s, Charles Spurgeon, he said anytime you see Selah when you're reading the Psalms, that you should stop, think, and meditate. Mm-hmm. That's kind of his take. It's kind of a good thing. You just take it paragraph by paragraph, stop, think, meditate, go from there. So, with that being said, this psalm actually gets mentioned. Of course, the story is from 1 Samuel, and we're going to go back to that in a second, but it gets mentioned in the New Testament too. If you flip over to Matthew's Gospel, chapter 12, verses 3 and 4, Jesus says this. He says, he answered, haven't you read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God, and he and his companions ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for them to do, but only for the priests. And so we've got this is under the heading of Jesus, the Lord of the Sabbath, where he's talking about, moral law, and that he wants moral law and mercy over ritual sacrifice and sacrificial law. And so kind of keep that in mind with the story, because once again, David, there's these little gray areas that pop up within David's life, and really some interesting ethical things that we can talk about at some point, when we do these studies. So flipping back then to 1 Samuel chapter 21, we get David and Nob. And Nob is, after Eli and his sons passed away, they moved the tabernacle from Shiloh to Nob. So Shiloh was where the tribes of Israel all used to go to worship. Now it's been moved to Nob. And Ahimelech is the priest that's in charge there at Nob. And this is in the continuation of the story. So Saul had tried to kill David, and David was on the run, and then he works out the deal with Jonathan to say, hey, is this, because Jonathan's like, no, my dad really doesn't mean to kill you. And so David says, hey, I'm going to say that I'm going to go sacrifice with my family and spend some time with my family. And if he doesn't make a big deal out of it, then things are okay. But if he does, then, please tell me. And then you get the whole story about the shooting of the arrows and all that. So that's where we're kind of at, is David knows that he's officially on the run from Saul. Saul's intent is to kill David. He's jealous of him. So David at Nob. David went to Nob to Ahimelech the priest, and Ahimelech trembled when he met him and said, why are you alone? Why is no one with you? So there's the first part. Why are you alone? So David's coming alone, but yet we get a sense later that he may not have been alone at this point.
Right.
Then later on, a few verses down, he, once again, actually it's verse 2. So David, gray area, because he's out there, and it says, David answered to him like the priest. The king sent me on a mission and said to me, no one is to know anything about the mission I am sending you on. As for my men, I have told them to meet me in a certain place. Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread and whatever you can find. So then the priest answers David, well, all I've got the sacrificial bread. And so every Sabbath day, they would bake 12 loaves of bread and bring them into the temple, the tabernacle, and only the priests were allowed to eat that consecrated bread. No one else was supposed to. But the priest said, hey, I don't have any bread other than this bread. And he said, well, we need it. And the priest says, well, you can't eat it, especially if you've been with a woman. And David says, well, we haven't been with any women. We haven't been with any women. And we've kept ourselves from women. And so the priest gives him bread for the men. And that was the story that was then mentioned in Matthew. Mm-hmm. So we have that. So then while he is there, we get this interesting verse 7. And one of Paul's servants was there that day, detained before the Lord. He was Doeg, the Edomite, Saul's chief shepherd. So Doeg, John, you've looked up the name. I didn't know this.
Yeah. Doeg, it means fearing,
okay.
Actively afraid.
Okay, so he's actively afraid. So kind of think of
keep
that back.
Yeah, you wonder what is he actively afraid of, and then all my question in looking it up was, it's such an interesting name, mm-hmm. and is the name synonymous with who he is in the story, because this is the only time he's mentioned, mm-hmm. or is you go back, is that his personality trait that he was kind of fearful of everything, and so is he in the tabernacle today fearing? Why was he detained? I mean, it says clearly in several translations I looked at that he was detained before the Lord. Basically, right. All of them say that. So he was being held in the temple.
Yeah. For
some reason. We have, you could have a lot of reasons. Roger kind of looked up some of the reasons why he was ritually unclean. As an Edomite, he always is going to be that way. So he's trying to take care of himself. He could be under some kind of arrest, mm-hmm. Because the priests were also kind of like the constables. Mm-hmm. So he could be in some kind of house arrest. What was another one you had mentioned?
He could have been sacrificially unclean too. That,
right.
He, in order to participate in some of the festivals and things like this, he had to be ritually cleansed in order to be with Saul and the others of Saul's administration, we'll put it. Right. So because he's holding a high position. He's the chief shepherd. Mm-hmm. He's in charge of a lot of wealth. So that's one of the things. So in order to maybe participate in one of the festivals or something like this, even though he's not Jewish, he's an Edomite, he may have needed to go through a sacrificial cleansing as well. So,
and as an Edomite, he was a descendant of Esau.
Yes.
So he was supposed to be dead a long time ago.
Yes.
But Saul didn't kill. So all kinds of interesting things in the story about, and we don't want to make literally a mountain out of nothing here, mm-hmm. but I think Doeg is mentioned specifically. It is mentioned specifically that he was an Edomite, and it's mentioned specifically that he was detained before the Lord. So I think all of those things paint Doeg as this outsider that finds himself as literally a fly on the wall in this conversation between David and Ahimelech.
Yeah.
And so he's there, he experiences this conversation, and he finds it useful in a little while.
Yeah. So, the Edomites were, like you said, descendants of Esau. They were always going to be subservient. Remember, the birthright was stolen, and they were always they were servants, basically, to the Hebrews at this point. So he's listening to all this, and David says to the priest, the Ahimelech, he says, don't you have a sword or a spear here? I haven't brought my sword or another weapon, because he's on the run. He just took off, and because the king's mission was urgent. And then that's when we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. This is when he gets Goliath's sword, mm-hmm. and the priest says, yeah, I've got a sword here. I've got Goliath's sword.
He's got one sword.
I've been saving it up here for you, and it is now yours. Mm-hmm. So he has it wrapped in a piece of cloth behind the ephod, and he takes it and he gives him this sword. And David expresses, there's none like it. Give it to me. I like that. So he's got that. So then we continue the story a little bit later on, that in chapter 22 of 1 Samuel and verse 6, And Saul is at this point, he is sitting under a tamarisk tree, and he's got all his generals, his cabinet members, let's put it that way for modern vernacular, standing around him. And he is also, and he says in verse 6, now Saul heard that David and his men had been discovered. So Saul knows that David's got a group of men with him, and we talked about those. They were the outcasts from society and stuff that David takes and has this band together. So, and Saul's seated there with his spear in his hand under the tamarisk tree, and he's questioning his generals. Are you loyal to me, or are you loyal to David? Are you loyal to me? And Saul's got his paranoid act going again at this point. So he's sitting there, and who's conspiring against me? Which one of you has conspired against me? And so on. And finally, Doeg the Edomite steps up and he says, hey boss,
hey,
I got some news. Or,
fearing, the one fearing over here.
And so you really, when you think of fearing, you have to know what the motives are. And he says in verse 9, I saw the son of Jesse, who's David, come to Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, at Nob. Ahimelech inquired of the Lord for him, which isn't in the original story, so he may be adding that to it, and we'll talk about that in a minute, what that means. He also gave him provisions and the sword of Goliath at Goliath the Philistine. So inquired of the Lord for him. That was always the big thing before the Israelites went into battle, was they inquired of the Lord. And so that phrase really could mean something significant, like, hey, David inquired of the Lord, meaning he may be on the attack, or something like that.
Right. At least the priest went before God for David for something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So obviously this sends Saul through the roof. Right? Saul believes that Ahimelech, that there's this conspiracy against him. And so that's verse 13. Saul said to him, why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, giving him bread and the sword, inquiring of God for him, so that he has rebelled against me and lies in wait for me, as he does today. And Ahimelech, of course, Ahimelech had been brought to him at this point. I'm sorry, I kind of left that out.
Right.
But Ahimelech is standing before him, and Ahimelech gives his defense. Ahimelech says, hey, I know he's your son-in-law. Was one of your trusted generals. He goes, when he tells me he's on a mission from you, I take it he's on a mission from you. And so Ahimelech does have an honest defense. And here's where we get into that gray area, because David wasn't quite all that truthful.
Correct.
In the beginning.
He lied.
Just
say it.
He lied. And it's ultimately
lying several times.
Yeah, and it's going to cost Ahimelech big. So we get into verse 16. But the king said, you will surely die, Ahimelech, you and your whole family. Then the king ordered the guards at his side, turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because they have sided with David. The guards don't want to do it because they know that's bad juju. You don't want to kill the Levites. Not good. They're your own people, and they're the priests. Not going to do that. They are unwilling to do it. And so the king turns to Doeg and says, hey, kill the priests. So Doeg does it, and he kills all 85 of the priests from Nob. He kills their wives, their children. He kills all of the babies. He kills all of their cattle, all of their donkeys, and all of the sheep. He literally wipes out Nob. And one of the other significant things with that is, when we go back about chapter 15 of 1 Samuel, that was what Saul was supposed to do. And the reason why Saul was being removed from office was because he was supposed to wipe out the Amalekites to take the land and to free the Jewish people from their oppression. And the Amalekites also were, they practiced child sacrifice. God abhorred that. That was the whole, he had these tribes that he wanted his holy vengeance taken out upon, because they did child sacrifices, and he abhorred it. And so he had told them, wipe it out, but Saul didn't do it. Saul kept part of the booty from the raid for himself. And then we get that famous little verse in there from 1 Samuel. What is that bleating I hear in the sheep in the background? You told me you did what God said, and you didn't do what God said. Yeah. So we have that part of the story as well. So anyway, there's one son, though, from Ahimelech that did survive, and that was Ahitub. And, Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, who that's Ahimelech's full name. And then his name is Abiathar. And Abiathar escapes and he goes to David and he becomes David's faithful priest from then.
Right.
So there's the story behind the psalm. Now we get to move to the psalm.
And I think it's interesting for me. It several things in that story. The guards refused to kill Ahimelech, and so one of the things that makes me go is the guards were not following a direct order from the king. What do I do with that?
Yeah.
When they should have been killed on the spot, but Saul didn't follow through. And I think it shows to me how I rationalize that in my head. Again, it shows the paranoia of Saul, that he was so filled with hatred toward David that he wasn't in his right mind enough to say in this moment. It's the only sense I can make of it. He wasn't in his right mind enough in this moment to say to the guards, wait, you're supposed to do what I say.
Right.
He was so filled with rage at this moment about what was going on with David. And again, I think he sees the willingness of Doeg to do whatever Doeg needs to do to placate Saul, that Doeg rises as an easy one to fulfill a crazy man's desire. And I think that's where we get with this story for me, that you hate. I mean, I don't want to. It's interesting to me that even in this moment, David is not talking bad about the Lord's appointed. So I don't want to. I want to maintain David's plight here and not say Saul was a whack job. Yeah. but I think we see that, and we see that the guards were like, okay, Saul's in one of his deals. We're just kind of stand here and do nothing. And the officials and the generals, they're all just kind of standing around, and we have this easy guy Doeg popping up saying, I'll do it. Yep, give me a sword. And then he wipes out everybody, and I think does crazy bloodshed as Roger said. But then the other thing that jumps out at me at this story is David takes responsibility. I think at the end of chapter 22, where Abiathar goes to David, and in verse 22 of chapter 22 of 1 Samuel, David says to Abiathar, that day when Doeg the Edomite was there, I knew he would be sure to tell Saul. David says, I realized that day that Doeg was going to run back.
Yeah.
He was the fly on the wall. He was the one fearing. I don't know if David knew of Doeg the Edomite and knew what kind of personality and what kind of guy he was. But David said, I knew when I was there with Ahimelech and saw Doeg in the tabernacle, I knew he was going to run back and tell Saul. And then he says, I am responsible for the death of your father's whole family. David takes complete responsibility at that point. And I think there shows the kind of a person David is. Yes, David was deceitful. Yes, David was doing whatever he could do to stay alive in the moment, running from Saul. But then he said, I think in a moment of remorse, he said, it's my actions that have caused the death of your entire family. And so because of that, you stay with me and do not be afraid. Do not be fearing as your father was. Your father was known for fearing. You, though, have no reason to fear. You have no reason to fret. The man who is seeking your life is seeking mine also, and you will be safe with me. So I think there in this moment with Doeg the Edomite, this outcast one, this one who is known for fearing, David claims responsibility, and in claiming responsibility for the sin, says to this family, you can break your family's curse. I am going before the Lord, and you have no reason for you or your family to fear any longer, because I will protect you. And I think that's a pretty cool insight into what I take away from Doeg being known as the fearing one to saying, Abiathar, you have no reason to fear any longer. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a cool thing. So now we jump back to Psalms 52.
So when we jump back into Psalm 52, we can break it up into basically two big sections with a little interim in there. So in the first part of it is about sin and its punishment, and basically David describes the man who loved evil and lying. So describing Doeg, and then in verse 5 he gives the response from heaven. And so in verse 5 it says, "Surely God will bring you down to everlasting ruin. He will snatch you up and pluck you from your tent. He will uproot you from the land of the living." Interesting for the time period, once again, we're in a nomadic society. Your tent was your house. Mm-hmm. And he's going to literally take your house, snatch you out of your house. Mm-hmm. I'm going to pluck you out of your house, up you from the land of the living. And obviously I'm going to take you from the land of the living to the land of the dead, to Hades, to Sheol. There we go. I was looking for the Old Testament word, Sheol. So I'm going to take you to the land of Sheol. And then where we get into some the reaction of the righteous is in verses 6 and 7. And we kind of want to dwell on the righteous side, instead of about the evil and lying side. So verses 6 and 7, the general response is that the righteous will see and fear. They will laugh at you, saying, "Here now is the man who did not make God his stronghold, but trusted in his great wealth and grew strong by destroying others." Doeg is going to be a man of great wealth. He's in charge of great wealth, mm-hmm. and so therefore he is a wealthy man. And so it's interesting, you trust in your great wealth. Once again, the Bible doesn't say there's anything wrong with wealth, but it does say numerous places that don't put your faith in your wealth.
Right, your trust, yeah.
Yeah. So that's part of it. And so he did not make his stronghold in God, trusted his great wealth, and he grew strong by destroying others, by knocking other people down, by getting ahead. Once again, you kind of think of that, when Doeg, because of being the shepherd, Doeg kind of sounds like dog, the fearful. I kind of get this, like the Wile E. Coyote kind of vision in my head. That nervous energy, looking for his place, looking to, go down through there. So then verses 8 and 9 are David's responses. Very interesting. So now he's making it personal. "But I am like an olive tree flourishing in the house of God. I trust in God's unfailing love forever and ever. For what you have done, I will always praise you. In the presence of your faithful people, I will hope in your name, for your name is good." Interesting that I am like an olive tree flourishing in the house of God. We don't know what that meant. Did that mean that there at Nob, that there was an olive tree that was there, and David was struck by its beauty? Was it that because the olive tree, he's making a reference to because it was planted by your temple, by your tabernacle, that it got a blessing too and it flourished? We really don't know what.
Yeah, is he talking about his palace? I mean, we looked at that that at this point there is not the temple. The house of God is in a tent. We talked a couple of weeks ago about the building of the palace of David, and that was referred to as the house of God. So is he talking about a really nice tree outside of his house?
Right.
But whatever he's talking about, we get the symbolism that he is an olive tree that's flourishing.
Yeah. There's also a sense of dynasty there too, because if olive trees grow to like 500 years old.
Right.
So he knows this. An olive tree that flourishes is there for a long, long time. It's like for centuries.
Yeah.
So.
And I think bottom line, I think this psalm is very simple. It says evil people are going to be destroyed. Godly people are going to rest in God's faithfulness. Mm-hmm. That's in simplicity what it boils down to. The first, as Roger said, the first half, 2/3 of the psalm, two-thirds of the psalm is talking about the plight of the evil ones. Mm-hmm. He saw their tongue plots destruction. They're sharp. They practice deceit. They live in falsehood. Every harmful word. But again, and then in verse 5, God's going to bring you to ruin. He's going to snatch you up, tear you down, uproot you. All these words that the end for the people that seek evil is destruction. But David says, but on the other hand, I am going to be like an olive tree. I'm going to be long lasting. I'm going to set my roots deep. I'm going to bloom in season. All those things, and that I am going to trust in God's unfailing love. I'm going to praise you forever for what you've done. And I'll hope in you always that you're going to be good. And so we have that dichotomy that we all find ourselves in today. Mm-hmm. You know, we see evil people around us flourishing, and we can join them, or we can step back as David did and said, no, I'm not going to do that. I know what their end game is. I can see it. I read it in Scripture. But I am going to trust in God's unfailing love. I'm going to praise Him no matter what happens. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to always hope that you're going to bring about good in life, in my life, and the lives of those around me. Mm-hmm. And he said, in the presence, I will always praise your name in the presence of your saints. I'll always have your praise upon my lips, God. And I think that's a kind of a hope and a desire for all of us in this life.
Yeah. John and I have always, when we mentioned it in a past episode, but we would really love to do a word study sometime when that word hesed. That hesed word hesed popped up again in this psalm, mm-hmm. in verse 8, that unfailing love is hesed, that covenantal loyal love that God has for us, and He's looking for that faithful loyal love from us back and on a continual basis. And it's that I hate to use contraction. Covenant is a strong contract. So is that contractual covenantal love. And then, so in the word in verse 9 for faithful people is the hesidim. And so you've got, which is the faithful and loyal people. So we can ask, what does it mean to accept God's hesed? And are we willing to become one of God's hesidim? Yeah. Are we willing to accept His covenantal love? And are we willing to fulfill our end of the covenant and be His faithful people?
Right. I think it comes back to that. When we talk covenant in the Old Testament and even throughout Scripture, the hesed, the loyalty that we have toward God, and God is loyal to us, mm-hmm. and so our response is to be loyal back to Him, and that loyalty manifests itself in me choosing not to admire or admonish or participate in those who are being disloyal. Despite what this person over here does with their deceitful tongue and their fearfuling and living in fear, I want to choose to continually be loyal to God and to trust in His loyalty to me. Yeah. I think that's kind of where the psalm ends. And it's a great message for us, mm-hmm. to be mindful of in our culture, when we see so many people around us inside, as Doeg was at the time, inside mm-hmm. the tabernacle, and those outside the tabernacle, those inside the church and outside the church, choosing to be fearful, choosing to choose their own way, to be dishonest, to plot destruction, to be sinister, to get ahead at any cost. Yeah. And what do we do? Do we join them? Do we say, hey, Doeg's doing pretty good. Mm-hmm. He did some unrighteous things, but he made Saul happy. Yeah. So is that what I'm supposed to do? Or am I supposed to know I'm going to side with David and continue to be loyal to my God? And it's difficult. It is, but I think that's where we find ourselves.
Yeah. Excellent. So once again, we'd love to hear what you think about the psalm. Yeah. Please email John. He shares all the emails with me. And so we'd love to hear your thoughts and hope you're enjoying the study. Yeah. Hope you have a great week. Once again, we are looking forward to Advent and Christmas. And so thank you for joining us. Hope you have that great week. Once again, John, I will let you
Oh.
close us out with our, hey, this is our mantra.
That's our mantra. We can't go. And yeah, I think thank you, Roger. Thank you for leading today. Psalms 52, I think, is very timely for us, and I think I challenge you to go, as Roger just said, go back and read it for yourself, and at those moments of Selah, pause and meditate on it and say, who am I in this story? Am I the Doeg prototype, or am I the David prototype? And I think we always want to land on the David side. And so with that said, be wise, be safe, put your mask on out there. And as we always close, we desire people that are loyal to God, who are being the church. So be the church. God bless you.
Church.